Thank you. We're doing a rapid presentation today, so we're not going to be able to go through introductions of about 40 people. So if you can just put your name and then which organization you represent, that'd be great. I can put it in first. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves in the chat, writing your name and affiliation. All right, so let's get started. I mean, it's 10:03 now, and I know folks are going to trickle in, but I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to go through all of the work that we need to get done today. It's going to be more of a working meeting, so I would like to make sure that we had the opportunity to go through everything. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Sector Analysis and Strategy Town Hall, hosted by the Regional Consortium and the Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research, or the COE. My name is Tina Ngel Martel, and I'll be your facilitator this morning. As we mentioned at other regional meetings, we conduct this sector strategy exercise every 2 to 3 years to figure out what role that we, the San Diego and Imperial Counties community colleges, can play in our region's key sectors. So the last time we did this was in 2018, and then now we're redoing a refresh of our sector analysis and strategy report. It's basically a report that will help inform our regional activities, such as research, marketing efforts, and employer engagements, just to name a few. So if you're wondering why you're here, it's a very important process because it helps us with our strategic planning, as well as some program development. So here's the process. First, we conducted a quantitative analysis where we looked at over 15 different labor market metrics for each sector, and then we ranked them accordingly. So this was the sector analysis report that we, the COE, completed in April. We sent the draft report to the Workforce Development Council, the Regional Oversight Committee, and other stakeholders. You may recall that the report looks something like this. We produced it in April of this year, and we sent out the draft to everybody, and you should have had a draft before this meeting as well. If you didn't have a chance to review it, a lot of the content will be in the presentation, so don't worry about that. You'll recall that we also created a separate report for Imperial County and for San Diego County because they have 2 different economies. So that part of the process is done. The second part to this process, Chris, do you mind muting the background noise? Thank you.
What? Sorry. Yeah.
The second part of this process is the qualitative or SWOT analysis, which we're conducting today as a town hall. If you've never done a SWOT analysis before, it basically reviews strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for each of the data, each of the sector. And this is information that we cannot capture by traditional labor market research. Strengths and weaknesses are internal factors, and opportunities and threats are external factors. So essentially, whatever is strengths and weaknesses are within our education or community college system, and things that are opportunities and threats are in the labor market, which we'll present today. And then together we'll go through the opportunities and threats together as a group. So in our sector analysis report, we looked at 11 different sectors. You'll notice that one of the sectors that's recognized by the Chancellor's Office, global trade, isn't listed here. Global trade actually overlaps a lot with business and entrepreneurship and with advanced transportation and logistics. So we as a region combined, included global trade within those 2 sectors. And you've probably seen this timeline a few times, but essentially we did our analysis in the past few months, and then we're hosting the town hall today, where we're going to get your feedback on each of the sectors. And then you'll have the opportunity to continue providing to the SWOT analysis or that qualitative portion of this report until June 25th. So if there's anybody that was not able to attend today, maybe department chairs, fellow faculty members, other partners, feel free to continue to add to that SWOT analysis until close to the end of this month. This meeting is being recorded, and it will also be posted on the Regional Consortium website for those that want to go back and take a look at what we reviewed as a group. Okay. All right, so our goals for today. I'm going to present our preliminary SWOT analysis and the sector trends. As I mentioned, we did the sector report, and that looks primarily at labor market research. So those are the opportunities and threats, or the external factors that's outside of our community college or education system. So I'll present those first. If you have any clarifying questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or raise your hand. We'll get to it. We'll have a Q&A section right after the presentation. All of this information is in the SWOT analysis Google Doc that we sent out earlier, and I'll share the link again when it comes time to it. While we're answering the questions, we'll conduct the SWOT analysis as a group. So we're going to focus on those internal strengths and weaknesses as a region in terms of our education and community college system, and type that in together as a group in the Google Doc. I also have some instructions for that later on in the presentation as well. So those are the three main things we're going to try to get done today. As a reminder, I reiterate this at every meeting, we are not deciding anything today. Your input will be used in the regional report when we make recommendations for the region and for the colleges. So again, this is the final product of today's activities, and of your asynchronous contributions to the SWOT analysis will be that recommendations report. Okay. All right, some ground rules. So we have 11 sectors and only 1.5 hours. You might say this is pretty ambitious, but I talk very quickly and we've done this before. So a lot of the information is rehashed from previous sector analyses. During the presentation, please raise your hand again using the Zoom option to raise your hand, or just type your question in the chat and we'll get to it during the Q&A. While we're reviewing your questions during the Q&A, I'll instruct folks to open up the Google Doc so we can take a look at it together, and then we can interactively work on the SWOT analysis together. Again, everybody will have the opportunity to add to this Google Doc or the SWOT analysis until June 25th. I have to remind folks that whatever comments you put in there, please make sure to respect each other and refrain from making personal attacks. I know some folks might have very strong opinions about one sector or another, but let's not talk about individuals, but talk about the sector itself. And then acknowledge that it's okay to disagree. So totally fine if we have disagreements in the chat and in the comments, but again, just make sure that we respect each other during this. We've had contentious meetings about sector analyses before, and I'd like to avoid that this time. Okay. All right, so again, those are the three things we're gonna do today. And I'm going to present our opportunities and threats based on the report that we completed earlier this year. And I'm going to go through each of the sectors. So for the SWOT analysis, each sector has 5 different sections. In the Google Doc, you'll see these table headings or section headings. You'll have the strengths, as I mentioned earlier. These are internal factors, or whatever strengths we have within our education and community college system. Weaknesses lists those internal factors within our system as well. So the sector report that we completed doesn't focus so much on the strengths and weaknesses in education and in our system. This is why you're here, because you're the education experts. The report focuses more on opportunities and threats, which again, I'll present in a minute. And these are based off of not just the sector analysis report we just finished this year, but also prior reports, since we've done this exercise a few times already. And then finally, each sector has a recommendation section right here. At the end of the Google Doc, there's an option for us to provide recommendations for all sectors. So if your recommendation isn't specific to the sector, I recommend that you put it at the bottom where it's a recommendation for all sectors. Again, I'll walk you through the instructions for the SWOT analysis in a minute after this presentation. Okay. All right, so if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. I don't see anything so far. So based on your silence, I think everybody is good to go on the instructions and ground rules for today. See some nods. Wonderful. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's go through some of the trends that we found in our report. So for advanced manufacturing, several positions are pandemic resilient. So while they weren't recession resilient, we found that a lot of these positions were resilient during the pandemic. So a lot of manufacturing jobs that were growing during the COVID pandemic. It's one of the sectors with an aging workforce. This has been a trend for years since I've been studying labor market research for almost a decade now. It's been an aging workforce that we need to take care of. Companies are interested in diversifying their workforce because of this. The sector is represented primarily by male workers. And so companies are interested in growing their talent pipeline of younger workers and female workers. Employers have difficulty hiring and retaining workers at entry-level positions. A lot of times when we talk to employers, they will say that they hire for entry-level positions only to have them trained up at the company and then leave for a different company for a slightly higher pay, for example. So employers have a very difficult time finding qualified workers and retaining them without a huge cost. So this is it's a sector that also has a stigma to it. There is a public perception that the sector is dark, dirty, and dangerous, and that seems to have been improving over time, but there's still a lot of work that can be done. So our workforce board and EDCs have been working with us, the community college system, to try to change this public perception of the sector. And it's one of the sectors at risk of automation. It's one of the top sectors at risk of automation. So you'll notice over time for advanced manufacturing, a lot of jobs were manual in the way in the beginning, and now we have a lot more jobs that are automated through computer use, and so new skills are needed. So fewer jobs and more high-tech jobs. A lot of these comments and highlights can be found again in these opportunities and threats. I'm just going through them quickly for those that are auditory learners, but you can actually see them in the Google Doc. Okay. So our next sector that we have is advanced transportation and logistics. It's one of the top sectors with the highest percentage growth. And during the pandemic, you probably saw a ton of articles about supply chain and logistics disruptions. It was huge. It's a pandemic resilient part of the sector. There's a lot of opportunity in electric and hybrid vehicles. As you probably know, Governor Newsom just released a statement that they're trying to get to all electric vehicles by 2035. And so employers in the past and currently and in the future are having difficulty finding folks with those skill sets in electric and hybrid vehicles. It is one of the top sectors at risk of automation based on our automation index in our report. So a lot of these skills, again, is not going to be very manual. It's going to be very highly computerized. The labor market for pilots in the sector is small in our county, but it's large across the whole nation. So that's one of the challenges with labor market research is that we focus in our county, but a lot of these positions go elsewhere as well. It is mostly represented by male workers, similar to advanced manufacturing. And a lot of these positions are posted with a minimum requirement of a bachelor's degree. While when we did our report on supply chain and logistics, a lot of them actually could be filled with credentials and an associate degree, yet employers are posting a minimum of a bachelor's degree. So that's one of the threats of this sector. Okay. So business entrepreneurship. So this one has a lot of different trends. I've highlighted only a few here, but 95% of our companies in San Diego County have fewer than 50 employees. Interestingly enough, while there were a lot of brick and mortar shops closing during the pandemic, we had record numbers, not just in San Diego County, but across the whole nation, of new business applications growing during the pandemic. So it seems like entrepreneurship was a skill set that folks are using to grow and try to adapt to the pandemic. We did a gig economy report earlier, a couple years ago, and we found that a lot of gig workers want training in business development, finance, and legal. So essentially they wanted training to find new customers. They wanted to know how to manage their finances personally and professionally. And they wanted to know about some of the legal complications of being a gig worker. Not everybody knows how much taxes they owe as a 1099 worker and how that all calculates out. Some of the challenges in the sector is that gig workers reported in when we did our study that they wanted a full-time job, and they would continue to work gig work until they can find a traditional employment. One of the key factors is because they were afraid they weren't making enough money to make ends meet. And so the gig economy was one thing that we researched and could be in focus of some of our programs as well. And then finally, one of the aspects of business was sales representatives that we studied. And it looks like there was a huge labor market gap for sales representatives, but a lot of companies would train in-house, especially for those in science, technology, and professional services, because those skill sets for sales representatives are very specialized. And so there's a gap there for sales representatives in the sector. All right, so health. Here are some other trends. Here are some trends for health. So the sector is pandemic resilient and recession resilient. So during the Great Recession between 2007 and 2009, health jobs grew. During the pandemic, they grew as well. And it is currently the top sector with the most jobs in San Diego County. We have clear career pathways in the sector. It has median wages at or above the living wage. However, it's one of the top sectors with an aging workforce. So of that list of 11 sectors that I just shared with everybody, it ranks third in terms of an aging workforce. This sector has been known to have limited clinical placements. So without those clinical placement opportunities, we can't fill certain positions such as registered nursing. It has the highest percentage change in occupation. So meaning that even though it's a big sector, it also has the highest percentage change in terms of its growth rate. It's highly represented by female workers, but it has a low automation risk. ICT and digital media. It wasn't listed as a recession resilient job, but it was pandemic resilient. We found a lot of ICT positions growing during the pandemic. There's a high percentage job growth. It ranks fourth out of the 11 sectors that we studied. There's a lot of programs in ICT and digital media, not just in the community college system, but everywhere, online throughout the entire region. And it could be unclear and have confusing career pathways. There are high entry level and median wages for the sector overall. We have a very strong concentration of jobs in the sector for our region compared to the rest of the nation. So think of, in terms of our ability to have more jobs in this particular sector than any other region when you compare it to any other region in the nation. It's disproportionately male or highly represented by male workers. There's a low automation risk, so that's good. And then employers, similar to our other sector, require a bachelor's degree, but a lot of these positions can actually be filled by credentials. Okay. So life sciences and biotech, similar to health, it was both recession and pandemic resilient. Those jobs grew despite economic downturns. Life sciences and biotech has a small number of companies, but we also have a strong concentration in the region compared to the rest of the nation. Similar to ICT and advanced transportation and logistics, a lot of these positions can be trained by the community colleges and filled by associate degrees for entry-level positions, but employers post a minimum of bachelor's degree. There are high entry and median level wages for this sector. It's also highly represented by males. And companies, because of that, are interested in a diversity, equity, and inclusion activities. They're interested in attracting youth and hiring for diversity. And there's a low automation risk for the sector. Okay. All right, still seeing no questions so far, so I'm just going to keep going. Again, this is already written in our SWOT analysis in the Google Doc, so you'll see a lot of these, but I wanted to make sure folks knew what trends we saw in the labor market before we conducted our strengths and weaknesses. All right. So for agriculture, water, and environmental technologies, there is a retiring workforce. It's one of the top sectors with workers aged 55 and older. It is highly represented by males, similar to our ICT, advanced transportation, advanced manufacturing sectors. It's a small portion of San Diego's economy, so it ranks 10th or 11th in terms of jobs, depending on how you slice and dice the data. So it's at the bottom of the list of those 11 sectors. However, there's a lot of new technologies coming out for agriculture, water, and environmental tech, and employers repeatedly told us that they have difficulty finding workers for these new technologies. In education and human development sector, we have quite a few establishments, so basically businesses that deal with education and human development. There's also a large increase in those establishments in the past 10 years. However, it has a retiring workforce. We found that a lot of these positions pay low rate wages. There are a lot of programs that exist in the region. Every single college has a program in education and human development. Childcare costs is a regional concern. So I think if you look at the SWOT analysis, it says about for a single month, a infant and a toddler of childcare costs can amount to over $2,000 a month for a family. There's a shortage of teachers in the sector. It's low risk of automation, however, and it's highly represented by female workers and students. There's a lot of students that enroll into those programs, but the sector itself is represented a lot by female workers. All right, so ECU, or Energy Construction and Utilities, while it was not recession resilient, it was pandemic resilient. You probably saw a lot of construction going on during the pandemic. There's a significant number of and a lot of increase in the number of establishments in the region. So it was one of the top sectors with businesses in the region, and then those businesses continue to grow over the past 10 years. They have a large retiring workforce. It ranks top in one of the sectors with a retiring workforce. In our programs, we have a lot of enrollments from older students or more mature students, usually past the age of 25 in our programs. It's disproportionately male, or there's a high representation of males in this sector. Our apprenticeship programs, however, have a high retention and completion rate, and the sector has a high automation risk. All right, so public safety and government. So we're almost done. There's only 2 left. Again, this is rapid fire of our trends, right, of what's going on in our region. So public safety and government, we have a lot of jobs in our region. San Diego County is known for defense, right? But there's a low percentage change. So we basically maintained employment in this sector in our county for the past 10 years. There are high entry level and median earnings for public safety and government jobs. So if you look at the overall earnings for the sector, you'll see that they made on average 93,000 and plus, and it ranks 4 out of the 11 sectors in terms of the earnings. We have a small number of establishments, but in terms of the rate of increase over the past 10 years, it's actually pretty high. And it ranks at the bottom in terms of the number of people who are retiring, or the retiring workforce, out of all the 11 sectors. So out of 11 sectors, it ranks 11 in terms of how many people are age 55 and older. So that was interesting for me to find out. Okay. And then finally, we have our HT, or retail, hospitality, and tourism. So this sector was not recession or pandemic resilient. We didn't find growth in either of those economic downturns. Employers have difficulty now that the economy is rebounding. So similar to the Great Recession, a lot of companies shut down. We saw a lot of brick and mortar shops shut down, but now that things are opening back up again, they're having so much difficulty trying to fill those positions. There's a high number of jobs and establishments. So we have a lot of jobs here and a lot of businesses, but the percentage growth rate is pretty low. And because we're a tourism hub, there's a strong concentration of jobs in our region compared to the rest of the nation. Unfortunately, the sector has high turnover. It's known for low wages, and it has a high automation risk. So these are some of the trends that we found in our sector analysis. All right. So let me see if there are any questions in the Q&A. There you go. So those were our 11 sectors and our external factors, our opportunities and threats. Okay. For those of you who haven't had a chance to open up the Google Doc, I'm entering the link to the Google Doc now into the chat. So next, what we're going to do, now that we've reviewed some of these high-level trends for each of the sectors, we're going to do the SWOT analysis together. Okay. While folks are opening up this Google Doc, I'll answer some questions in the chat. All right, so Cassandra asked, hi Multiplier, do you have any information as to why? I only have some anecdotal information. Usually a multiplier is an indicator that if you add one job to the region, it generates other indirect and direct jobs based on the company's activities and the activities of the workers in the economy. So for example, let's say we add a job in ICT and digital media, and it generates several jobs. Those jobs are either hired in other companies that are supplying goods and services to those ICT companies that are growing or hiring, or those the other indirect jobs would be people who are serving or in industries that are helping with the workers in that sector. So for example, let's say I added a person in ICT, they have a lot of folks in like food services and so forth, that adds a job there. Or if I add a job in ICT and we need to get components for computer parts, that adds another job there. So that's how the multiplier works. And for ICT, I'm not too sure why they have such a high multiplier. It's just based on trends in economic analyses. Okay, so for Manny, he asked, how do you determine automation risk? So automation, it's an index generated by ONET Online, and also our data provider, EMSI or MZ, looks at it and then puts that automation index into their calculations. So for any given sector, if they have an automation index of 100, then they are at the average in terms of how more likely they're going to be automated for that particular occupation. If the index is above 100, then that means that that occupation is more likely than average to be automated by computer or other technologies. If it's below 100, then it's not likely to be automated, less likely to be at risk of automation. So the automation index is, the 100 index is the average, and anything above it is above average of automation risk. And then below it would be below average of automation risk. Again, it's an ONET index. It's not something that we generated. I hope that answers your questions. I will have to look that up for you for the automation risk, but you can type up, I think, automation index and in ONET in Google, and it should show up in your results. So I'm gonna type it here, automation index. There we go. And again, we got it from ONET and then EMSI, which I put in the chat. Okay, all right. So now I'm going to share the actual SWOT analysis. Oh, excuse me. Let me share the instructions first before we get into the SWOT analysis. All right, so we're going to open the Google Doc. Again, I sent the link to everybody in email, and it's also included in this chat. We're going to focus today on strengths and weaknesses or internal factors, those factors within our education and community college system. Again, we do labor market research, so we look at the external factors more than internal. In the Google Doc, you'll see something that says insert comments and highlights. So this is where you can put your comments. Let's say you don't want to put a comment, but you have a question for somebody's comment. You can use the Google Doc tools to do so. On the right-hand side here, you'll see this little icon, and you can click on that and highlight whatever it is that you want to respond to, click on it, and then put your comment or question to the person whoever put that comment there. You can engage in the Google Doc that way if you don't have any trends yourself that you want to add. If you have any suggested edits to the document, please use this icon. If you've never used Google Doc before, this is basically like track changes to make edits. And then per our email instructions, could you please include the source of whatever your comment is or statement and your affiliation. If you don't have the source and you're just an industry expert, that's totally fine. But at minimum, please include your affiliation. I saw some folks enter some information into the SWOT analysis already in preparation for this meeting. I thank you for it. I do have to remind you to please put your affiliation so we know who it's coming from. So here's an example in the Google Doc currently. So we put the statement here, we added the sources, and those are all hyperlinked to the various areas in which we got this comment or we generated this comment. And then we put community college because that was from a community college perspective. So please put your affiliation. If you're representing adult ed, put adult ed next to it. If you're from K-12, put K-12 and so forth. So again, we know where these comments are coming from. Okay. All right, so those are instructions for the SWOT analysis. As I mentioned, it's set up like this for every sector. When you open the document, you're going to see this landing page, and it should start off with instructions. These are similar directions that I sent out over email. If you click on this icon right here, you'll see a table of contents that pop up. So each of these sections here, you can go directly to the sector itself if that's a sector that you want to contribute to. If you have a recommendation for all sectors and it's not sector specific, please click to the bottom down here. it says recommendations all sectors. It will look something like this. These are some of the recommendations we had in 2018. So for example, we said, please create an inventory of all the skills and third-party credentials taught across credit, non-credit, not-for-credit programs. And this was from our community college work. And this applies to all sectors. So again, if it's not sector specific, please put your recommendations here. If it's sector specific, then please make sure to add it to the sector itself. Okay. All right, let's open this sector SWOT analysis together. I'm going to share my browser here. There we go. And Luisa, to answer your question, since I'm looking at the external factors, we were specifically talking about representation in the labor market. So in the labor force. Okay. All right. Okay. So here's where we're going to land. And if you click on advanced manufacturing, again, it looks like this. So you can click on that and it'll take you to the table of contents. So remember, please put in your affiliation where you can. Focus on the sector itself. And for each of the strengths and weaknesses, I put some prompts here for you to think about. So in strengths, what community college assets do we have to support this sector? Or what unique resources do we have access to support the sector? In terms of weaknesses, what are some areas that we can improve on? And what are some of our limitations to support the sector? So starting with advanced manufacturing, you'll see that we pre-populated a lot of these comments from past analyses. I appreciate folks already putting in some of their comments here, so thank you. Feel free to just go here and then hit enter and type in. I'm going to review these as we're going through, but feel free to jump ahead to any sector you want. Again, if you want to go advanced transportation, type in the comment here, health, ICT, digital media, and so forth. All right. So before we go into that, does anybody want to share any of the comments that they made and why they made the comments? So we can go through it together.
I can, because I was the one who entered most of the comments at the very bottom. I can start with the strengths. So this is based off my interaction with faculty and the college the past few years. I would say that we do have some state-of-the-art equipment, especially City College, for instance, and Palomar. For Palomar, for instance, there's a lack of space, but we have really strong, open-minded, skilled faculty in there. So lack of space for some college, state of the art for some other college, but marketing and enrollment is one of the challenges. But I think pandemic plays a big role in that, because you can only have so many students, right? And then some programs regionally have very good programs, right? For example, the CAT can across the region, not just the north and the central. But we need to expand further in welding, right? We need to look at robotic welding. We need to expand further in automation, which is mechatronics. And for weaknesses, I did thank you for those who added more like third-party certificates. I really like that. But I also added more, such as the importance of marketing and the understanding of the programs internally, because manufacturing, the perception of manufacturing is dirty, dark, and dangerous. If we have that perception outside, we can only imagine the perception inside our college, right? Because if we don't understand the program, let's say if I'm in outreach and all I know is business and all I know is math, for instance, then it would be really hard for me to, a challenge for me to try to market manufacturing, because I don't know what that is. So maybe there's some room for improvement there. And also enhancing the faculty's ability to effectively teach new generation. They are different now, they love videos. And also teaching new materials and skills. For other departments such as graphic design, where most of the programs can be taught virtually, there have been a lot of gamification of these programs, But it's hard to do that with manufacturing programs. So we need to be more creative and find ways to be able to teach our students, engage them so that they stay in the program, even though they already got a job. So that's one of the challenges, getting a job before they graduate and deciding not to come back. Last but not least, faculty resource allocation within the department. Some colleges don't have a lead faculty for some of their programs. They only have contract faculty, which is quite, it's can be challenging, right? For the morale of the faculty, and also how they go out and search for grants, and how can they try to do so many at once. So this is only for some colleges, but something to think about. Some of them are really strapped thin. So how can we provide support, temporary support for them even? So Tina, would that be enough? Or do you want me to go through the threats and opportunities too?
Oh, no, you're great. Yeah, I went through the threats and opportunities when I went through my rapid fire for each sector. Each of these just have more information. So for example, like when we talk about public perception, we did a report on this in 2014, and the dark, dirty, and dangerous perception hasn't really changed that much since then. I mean, it's changed quite a bit, but still, that's still a stigma that the sector has. But yeah, you don't have to go through these. Anything else folks want to highlight? I just wanted to talk about what we found last time, and it seems like somebody else also put this here. We found that because manufacturing requires a lot of space and equipment, there's a high barrier to entry or creating new programs. And most programs are capacity impacted, even if the programs are held at night. So that's something that we found in our programs the last time we did the sector analysis. All right, if there are no more comments for advanced manufacturing, seeing if there's anything in the chat, we can move on to advanced transportation. Oh yes, and please feel free to type in your recommendations for the sector specifically if you have them. If not, you can always click on this and then go straight to recommendations, all sectors. All right, so let's go to advanced transportation. So I shared with everybody that a lot of positions were pandemic resilient. A lot of the positions could be trained by community colleges, but then employers still posted a bachelor's degree anyways. So last time we did this research, we found that a lot of employers hire from programs before they even finished. So one of the weaknesses that we have is that we show success based on completion numbers. But if students are already hired by getting foundational skills, those completion numbers are going to be low, but they're hired. So that's some of the challenges in reporting. And then one of our strengths is that our diesel technology program is meeting the needs of the region. And we have a lot of supply chain and logistics programs in demand. And there's enough demand out there that every college can have a specific niche that they can train for. So we found that in 2018 and again in 2020 when we did our report. Is there anything anybody would like to add in terms of strengths and weaknesses in our advanced transportation and logistics programs?
Tina, this is John. I'll be adding quite a bit actually, because there's a lot of legislation, like you mentioned, with the clean vehicles kind of mandate. It's actually going to be phased in. So it's like by 2035, no sales of ICE vehicles. And then by 2045, I think it's medium duty and heavy duty trucks, even from outside of California, won't be able to enter. So that's going to be pretty interesting. And then there's also a warehouse boom going on right now, mega warehouse boom. And now that's being tied to emissions through carbs and a bunch of other things. So I'll be adding quite a bit here over the next, I guess, 2 weeks?
Yeah, no problem. If you want to also verbally explain to folks some of our strengths and weaknesses too, and what you've seen in your work, feel free to do so right now. So that way, even if you haven't been able to add it here in the document itself. All right, any other trends on our programs, either in the community college system or any other part of education? I know we have some K-12 partners and some adult ed partners here as well. All right, so that was transportation or advanced transportation and logistics. Let's see if there's anything else that we missed when we were talking about this, okay? Okay. All right, so business and entrepreneurship. So this is a big sector. We have no shortage of business and entrepreneurship programs in the region. Every educational institution offers some kind of business and entrepreneurship program. We found that out in 2018. That was shared to us by faculty and department chairs. We have one top code. So for those outside of our community college system, we label all our programs or designate all our programs with the program code. And one of the codes we have is marketing and distribution. So this particular top code or program code trains for sales positions. But based on that top code, we only had about 18 awards, but there's a lot of sales jobs throughout the county. So I think I mentioned that earlier, that employers in our threats here have a lot of opportunity for sales representatives, but they can't fill the gap because we're not training enough. So they do a lot of the training in-house to try to promote people to become sales reps, especially in scientific, professional, and technical services. So that's one of the weaknesses in the region, is that we have some of these programs, but they're not very specific to certain industries. And we are undersupplying the region in sales representatives. So while one of the strengths we have for business entrepreneurship is that there's no shortage of programs in the region, it is also a weakness because there's just so many programs, and it's very hard to match up what skills and programs lead to which jobs. And somebody commented here that other trainings provider contribute, but we don't partner effectively yet. So thank you for those who contributed to this.
Yeah,
to the slide. Yeah.
Tina, that was Ute. I failed to put in brackets that it was me. Sorry,
No problem.
but yeah. So there might be, especially same for manufacturing, there might be a space for us to collaborate and partner so that we could actually provide some of these positions that colleges cannot fill.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll move that up here. Go. Oh, that's not this one. Oh, this is opt-out lid. Thank you, Lisa, for
And I can add it to where I missed adding it to.
awesome. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, you're great. Thank you. I appreciated you contributing to it before the meeting too. So thank you. All right. Anyone else want to add anything about our strengths and weaknesses? And in this case, have anything else?
Oh, it's Jen.
Oh,
I
hi,
would just like to see more on entrepreneurship. We talk about gig economy, but there's really nothing on entrepreneurship. And I think that's been a really big focus of a lot of our colleges.
Jen, do you know how many programs specifically to entrepreneurship exist in the region?
I think all 10 colleges have something, maybe not a full-blown program, but every single college has something in entrepreneurship. So we have everything from having an incubator to maybe only having 1 or 2 classes.
Gotcha, thanks. All right. I think do we put that in here? Let's see. There's a couple of comments. Let's see if anybody added anything else. I ran through those already. Gig workers, okay. Partnering with adult ed. So we have a strong, well-developed startup and entrepreneurship community focused around mentoring and local investment. Yeah, we do have quite a few startup events that happen pretty regularly in San Diego County. I think Jennifer shares a lot of those activities whenever they come up. So let me walk you through the recommendations, unless somebody has something to add. Kevin? Sorry, so you mute yourself.
I was just going to say, I think one of the strengths too is
You're breaking up.
crossover of business and entrepreneurship.
I'm sorry, Kevin, can you repeat yourself? You broke up there.
I know, I just got that warning. right? The internet unstable. So I was going to say, I think one of the strengths to business and entrepreneurship is how we see so many positions throughout all of the sectors. And those foundational business skills we train for really carry into just about every position.
Awesome, thank you. I didn't copy it here, but essentially there were a lot of reports of those new business applications coming up. So I agree with Jen and Kevin that entrepreneurship could be something that we focus on. All right, so our previous recommendations from last time we did this, we said that we recommend convening employers and verifying if they would be interested in a sales certificate offered by the colleges. And these would focus on general skills, while employers can have their own internal programs that focus on their product specific knowledge. So again, for a lot of those professional, scientific, and technical services companies, they have very product specific knowledge that can't be trained by a generalized program or a generic program. So this is an issue with a lot of occupations, confirming with employers which require actually a bachelor's degree versus an associate degree. Thanks, Leslie, for putting that in there. And Cassandra mentioned that there are a lot of levels to different sales. So I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit from your experience, since you were in, you did do that kind of work in the industry before, Cassandra.
I did, yeah. So I just wanted to say that, you know, and I think it is a great idea, you know, the sales in general, training for it, but there are a lot of different types and levels to sales, from transactional sales that might be very quick to much longer relationship type sales. So there's just a lot of different, I guess, ways to approach sales positions. So it really is dependent on the employer. I ran the sales training for Zimmer, and so obviously we did require people with bachelor's and master's degrees, and then we wanted to do our own training. So not that the training's not important, that the region is suggesting, but that their companies are also very specific about their needs in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Tina.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra, for sharing that. Another one of those things we need to discuss with employers directly. Okay. Alrighty. All right, so another one. This is one thing that's been in the pipeline for a while, is engaging with employers to change hiring behaviors. So you probably heard multiple times today that a lot of employers post a bachelor's degrees for entry-level positions when it shouldn't really be a bachelor's degree requirement. It poses a lot of challenges. So if there's an entry-level position that requires a bachelor's degree, but it doesn't pay quite high enough for that individual to pay back student loans or whatnot, then of course that position, whoever is employed in it, there's going to be high turnover. They're going to try to move on to something else that is a little bit higher to pay back student loans or whatnot. And so we need to work with employers to change some of these hiring behaviors, especially if the position could be filled with an associate degree. We found a lot of those positions in supply chain and logistics when we did our report. And there's that challenge employers face when they hire somebody and lose somebody. There's that cost benefit, right? That you spent all this time training somebody up and then they move on to somewhere else. So again, working in our employer engagement to help employers change hiring behaviors is one of our recommendations from last time. There were a lot of short-term non-credit opportunities in this sector that we found. So that was one of our recommendations. And in partnering with organizations that currently already have those services. And then marketing some of these short-term career programs to gig workers, especially those that say that they're just working as a gig worker just to make money until they get a full-time job. So a lot of these workers are working odd hours. So they want programs that are very flexible, online hybrid programs. And a lot of them worked 30 hours or more a week in the gig economy, even though they still didn't consider it a full-time job. All right, anybody have anything else to add for our business and entrepreneurship trends or our programs? There you go. And Jennifer put in the chat here that one of our projects for the Strong Workforce programs is for sales, to create training in Salesforce. If those of you who have not used Salesforce before, it's a customer relationship management system, or a CRM. And that basically helps companies manage their customers. Okay. And Kevin mentioned in the chat that we are getting a lot of attention from our external partners and throughout the state for our work in advanced transportation and advanced manufacturing. So that's another trend that we can capitalize as we work on our sector strategy for those two sectors. All right, we're moving on pretty smoothly, everybody. I'm very glad that we were able to do this in a digital format. I don't know if you were here in 2018, but we did one for every single sector. So John Edwards and I from the COE hosted a 1.5 hour meeting for each sector. And you can imagine how that turned out. So I'm very glad that we were able to build on our work from 2018 and share it with everybody today. All right. So let's look at health. We know a lot about health because it's just a mature sector. Thanks, Ben. And I mentioned earlier some of the trends that we talked about. There's a large multiplier, the third largest multiplier, has the most jobs. It's represented a lot by female workers. Low risk of automation. And I don't know about you, but I would personally not like to interact with a robot. I would like to interact with a person if I go to the hospital. So I think that's one of the causes why. And okay, so anyways, we talked all about that earlier when I went through our opportunities and threats for the sector. So what have we learned about this sector in terms of education and community colleges? So we have high retention. And one of the key reasons for that is that the sector has a cohort model, or a lot of the programs in the health sector are based on cohorts. And cohorts usually have a higher retention rate than other programs that don't. We also found that in terms of our student outcomes, most students find a job related to their field of study, and they also obtain a median change of earnings that's higher than CTE program students in general. So what that means is that if they enter the community college system and they exit, that median change in earning, if it's an increase, they have a higher increase of the before and after entering the community college system than students that just go through career education programs in general. Okay. All right, and I mentioned here the career pathways are very clear because this is a mature sector. It's been around for a while, so we know what some of those pathways look like. Last time we talked about this, we found that program growth is limited to the lack of equipment, space, and instructors. There's a lot of regulatory requirements, and they have to meet a lot of student ratios. Lack of clinical placement opportunities, I mentioned earlier, was an issue in our region, just to supply for registered nurses, but this is an issue for even incumbent workers and for students, right? It's hard to find clinical placement opportunities for new students. And I'm not a health sector expert, but I believe last time we talked about this, that was also an issue for incumbent workers or existing workers. So if there's not enough clinical placement opportunities for the existing workers, they can't move on in their career ladders. And they also had to get some clinical placement hours. Same thing here, other training providers are here, but we don't collaborate effectively. Okay. And then in our research, we found that some colleges don't actually report their numbers to the chancellor's office. They report it to the board at the state that actually governs whatever occupation that they're training for. Okay. All righty. So those are some things that we found last time. All right. Bruce here mentioned medical front office, self check-ins, auto submit for medical billing. Is this being automated? I'm not quite sure what your question is, and I don't know if we have Connie or somebody else from health that can respond to that.
So Connie's out, Tina, but so while we see certain aspects of it, what you're mentioning, Bruce, kind of what Tina said is people don't want to walk in and click on a screen, right? They want that face-to-face. And so when we were meeting with a lot of the employers in this area, what they were looking at is how they combine some of the skills, some of the coding or billing skills and so forth, and have the people up front, they elevate their skills to beyond just being a receptionist, essentially.
Thanks, Thanks, Kevin, for responding to that. Yeah, and then Bruce mentioned that a lot of places also require some self check-in. Yeah, I think in every healthcare facility I've been to this past year, there's a self check-in option, but there's also an in-person option. I don't know if that's in general or the norm, but I do see both of those, the automated check-in, and still a few places still have the manual check-in. Let's see. But in terms of front office, we have a couple programs for that. We also released a report earlier in 2020, the end of 2020, called Patient Care Coordinators. Because we have limited clinical placement opportunities, our regional director for employer engagement in health, Connie, looked at other occupations that didn't require clinical placement, but still had a big gap in the labor market. And one of those occupations was patient care coordinators. Those are individuals that advocate on behalf of patients, especially when some patients aren't aware of what they can share or what it is they can share with their healthcare provider. And the patient care coordinators had a combination of not just patient advocacy, but also helping out with paperwork and so forth with their with patients at a healthcare facility. So those are some areas that are not being automated, and that has a new opportunity for our colleges to create programs. Okay. So John Edwards from our COE office looked up the automation index for medical front office and mentioned that it is in general, as an industry trend, ranking between moderately and high automated. All right. Okay. Any other comments for health?
Tina, if I could just add one of the things, and I know this was the case for almost all of our colleges, if not all of them during the pandemic, is we saw some wonderful employer engagement in different capacities during the pandemic. And so we were able to see a lot of relationships strengthened in other ways as the community colleges were able to support our health facilities in, a full range of things. And manufacturing came in too, with like the PPE requests and so forth. And then that evolved into like the vaccination sites. And so just this past week, I was talking to Dr. Ortiz from IVC, and he was sharing about the relationships that they've been able to strengthen with their local hospitals and clinics because of being able to supply students who could administer vaccines and so forth. And so I think it's important to note that those relationships are being strengthened throughout this process, and hopefully some of the challenges we've experienced in the past will start to work themselves out because of those stronger relationships.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, there are quite a few strong relationships that we've built over time with each of our sectors, so I really appreciate you sharing that. Okay. All right, so let's move on to ICT and digital media. And so some of our strengths here is that we have no shortage of programs in the region. Similar to business entrepreneurship, virtually every educational institution in the county has an ICT and digital media program. But this is also a weakness, because it also is, if you have too many programs, it's very hard to figure out which leads to which jobs, especially if students are trying to develop stackable skills across different colleges. Just decision paralysis of having so many programs can be a challenge. It is one of the sectors that have high enrollment numbers, but low completion and retention rates. So students might drop out because they take 1 or 2 courses to upskill, which we, the community college system, calls them as skills builders. So let's say I'm a professional, I come in and I want to learn Python because it's relevant to my work. I finish that class and then I drop out and I'm no longer in the community college system. That completion for that program is going to be low because I only took a class, for example. And students might actually drop out because they're unaware of the rigorousness of the training. So this is something that we found a lot in cybersecurity programs, not just at the colleges, but in education in general. There was a lot of promotion on cybersecurity. It's a big job. It's a huge issue right now, as you've all seen during the pandemic. And before that, cybersecurity is a huge issue. And so programs are recruiting nonstop for cybersecurity training. But once students come in, they didn't realize how rigorous the training was, and they drop out. So one of the the necessities for these programs is to have some kind of assessment and to have clear orientations for students so they know what's expected of them before they complete the program. We found 3 years ago that it's uncertain if some of our programs are over-designed. So that means that some colleges have programs with more units than others. And we found that in our catalogs at the chancellor's office as well, that you'll find certain programs offering training for a certain occupation, and they're not all consistent in how many units a student needs to take. We found that third-party certificates are very valued in this sector, but we don't know exactly which programs train for industry-recognized certificates and how many students obtain them. So essentially, students will train for an examination, but you still have to take the exam and pay for the fees. And those are often costly and paid by the student. So that can be a barrier to employment if the student doesn't have the funds to pay for the examination fee. And same thing here, adult ed contributes to this, but we don't partner effectively yet. Okay. Anybody want to add anything here for ICT and digital media? Okay, Dwayne said he might add to the comments later. And let us know if some of our trends are outdated. Again, the last time we conducted this exercise was in 2018. All right, and thanks Tina Ricolde for being here. Okay, awesome. All right. Oh, there seems to be some additional comments for strengths and opportunities. So from threats, here we go. So Dwayne mentioned that private industry certification boot camps may erode contract ed and adult ed demand. That's very true for a lot of online and boot camp type of programs in general. With the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in online offerings for a variety of occupations and sectors. And so, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of one of the weaknesses, if there's no shortage of programs, there's a lot of options students can take from. So imagine being at a restaurant, you have like 100 things on the menu to pick in 5 minutes, right? It's like that decision paralysis that I always talk about. So that can be very confusing for students. If there's a ton of free online programs or programs that offer free training, but with a loan or something. So we need to make sure that we advertise our programs accordingly, talk about the quality, and also caution students about some of the pros and cons of these other training programs. So that seems to be a challenge that we've experienced before. Thanks, Dwayne, for adding that. Okay. So, okay. Yeah, and Dwayne added some industry trends about which other technical skills employers are looking for. Okay. Great. All right. So let's see. Anything else? Okay. All right. I mentioned a few of these already. Okay. All right. So if nothing else for ICT and digital media, let's go to life sciences and biotech. So my goal is to get you out here on time. So I want to make sure that we go through each of these sectors. So for life sciences, Terry Quenzer, our statewide director for life sciences and biotech, had a few comments. She said weaknesses, classes have to be small due to equipment and other constraints, and risk cancellation is not filled. Opportunities, there's a huge growth in opportunities in cell and gene therapy and in cellular and acellular fluids, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, leather, silk, and other materials, and marketing to passions for saving the planet because these technologies are sustainable and will reduce our carbon footprint. So those are some opportunities. Threats, assuming that life sciences and biotech is only medical health related, is short-sighted and neglects career opportunities in other life sciences and biotech industries such as food, agriculture, and environmental technologies. And her recommendation is that we need more accelerated training in biotech. So shorten it to 6 to 9 weeks. Thank you, Terry. I think you left already because you had to go to another meeting, but thank you for sharing that. All right. Okay, so what we found in terms of strengths, last time we did this, is that we have a cohort-based biomanufacturing bachelor's degree program at Miracosta College. So we have at least one program that offers a bachelor's degree for the sector in the community college system. We found that there was a large demand and small supply. So one of our programs, biotechnology, biomedical technology, only offers 51 awards, but we found as a labor market research center over 1,000 openings. So it was a huge labor market gap. We have low enrollment numbers for existing programs, or at the time we did. And we found that developing programs south of the 8th was very challenging because a lot of the companies exist north of the 8. And so if students are not familiar with jobs in the sector because it's not in their backyard, for example, they probably wouldn't enroll in some of these programs. And I appreciate that. I think Terry put this here. One of our weaknesses is that we have to keep the sizes for the class small because of limited equipment. There was a recommendation last time about aligning curricula across colleges. So with Miracosta's biomanufacturing program, a lot of the associate degree programs can feed into the program. However, the curriculum wasn't aligned yet to meet the bachelor's degree requirements. And I don't know if I see anybody from that program here, but if that's still true, then we'll keep it there. If it's not, then we can always revise it.
Hey, Tina, this is Kale.
Hi, Kale.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. The biggest bottleneck there is on the bioprocessing side. The capital investment for upstream and downstream bioprocessing is very expensive. And those are the main requirements to get into the biomanufacturing program. There are courses that you can take online and do some cross-regional partnerships as far as enrollment, and as well as biostatistics, the basic biotechnology courses. Those can all be performed at the other 9 institutions. It's just making dovetail opportunities to have cross-regional enrollments and really leveraging student center funding formulas.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Kale, for sharing that. And then Rebecca also mentioned that Miramar is working with Miracosta based on this recommendation. Great to know. Thank you. It's good to see that there's some progress being made since our last recommendation. And Kevin responded to that, saying that these alignment challenges are being addressed through our sector recommendations or our sector investments. Okay, and Ben, I'm sorry I missed your comment. I'll put that it's limited rather than low. Thank you. Awesome. All right, so those are all the sectors that we have a regional director for. Some of these are a little bit more difficult to find information for just because we've invested a lot of our research in the other sectors, but if you have information for them, please share. So ag, water, environmental technologies, Mesa College wrote here that they have a beer fermentation program. Thank you for including that. Miracles is the current co-LEA. So I think that's local educational agency for the viticulture enology technician apprenticeship program. Sure hope I wrote that, stated that right. I don't know if you wanted to share anything, Joy, about these 2 programs and talk about some of the strengths we have for the sector.
Sure. Just really briefly, these are ones, so I'm the statewide director for retail, hospitality, and tourism. And we have featured both of these programs because the Mesa College beer fermentation, even though it falls in ag, you're serving beer and that becomes hospitality and is a draw, right? If you have a beer festival or the place becomes a place to visit. So it's an overlap. But the viticulture apprenticeship program was actually kudos to City College for launching it a few years ago. It's an approved apprenticeship program now in Riverside County too. We've added Mount San Jacinto, so the co-LEA between Miracosta. The reason I bring it up is an opportunity. We just heard about the apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeship funding that is supposed to be coming out later in this year in August. So for the region to look at both of these areas, perhaps for future funding. The cool thing about both of these things, they lead to business entrepreneurship and greater economic strength. So let me just give you an example that the first person through the viticulture enology apprenticeship program was a retired middle school teacher who became a viticulture consultant. So she was in her 60s and she started her own consulting company and has been successfully working in San Diego. That's not something people think about, right? You're thinking you're working in the vineyard, and then the same with the beer piece. So it is a pathway to an entrepreneurship dream success. So I would say that with the funding opportunity with the CHI grants, keep that in mind for the region going forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Joy, for joining us today. Appreciate it. Do you mind explaining the CHI grant for us? So
sure. This was the innovative apprenticeships. They're going to be released from the Chancellor's office supposedly later in this August. We were just on a webinar last week, and I know Janine has captured the slides from that, but there are 2 tracks that a college can apply to: $500,000 for a pre-apprenticeship track and $500,000 for an apprenticeship track. Since this is an already existing apprenticeship, the VTAP one, it's an opportunity for colleges to perhaps look at pre-apprenticeship, because then it ties to it, and the more apprentices, the better. This program actually hires everyone who gets through it. They all get work, and they also qualify for funding. So anyway, the CHI grants, more details to come, but estimated RFA to come out in August, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Janine. And then applications are not due until December. So your timing on looking at the sector work is really timely. You have some time, but it's a big chunk of money. If you've looked at the budget for these innovative apprenticeships, this is still a high priority for the governor and the legislature. So it's an opportunity for lots of these sectors to work on that.
Thank you so much. That's really great information. I think we can add that to the all sector recommendation section here. I have my team on the board. So Robert, if you're there to just make a note of that as well, to add to all sectors that we really need to take a look at our apprenticeship programs for all of the sectors. Thank you, Joy. Really appreciate you being here. Okay, so that's ag. Okay. All right, so education and human development. So I mentioned the threats and opportunities earlier. Here are some things we found out about our program using launch board data. We found that while students obtain a job closely related to their field of study, only 28% of students who complete an education and human development program actually obtain a living wage. So this is compared to 51% of students in career ed in general. And then median wages or annual earnings for students who complete this programs in the sector are lower than CTE in general. So on average, students get about almost 24,000 versus 34,000 in CTE programs in general. Most of the students who enroll are female, and every college in the region has an EHD or Education and Human Development program. So those are some of the strengths that we found. Oh, sorry, this one is lower, so this should be over here. Anybody else have anything they wanted to add to education and human development programs in our region? All right, then. All right, moving on. So ECU is a hot topic. It has a lot of opportunities for apprenticeship programs, but we also have quite a few data sets. We talked about it being pandemic resilient. It was a huge growth during this past year. In our launch board data that we found from the Chancellor's office, it looks like 80% of the students reported finding a job closely related to their field of study. This is very high. It's higher than the 73% of students who said that they found a job related to their field of study in career ed in general. 70% of our students that finish one of these programs got a living wage. And this is compared to 51% of students who complete a career ed program in general. And as we mentioned, apprenticeship programs have high retention and completion rates, and they tend to pay a higher wage. I think that's called the prevailing wage. I don't know if that's after they become a journeyman, but essentially apprenticeship program students tend to make a higher wage than those that are not. Let's see, we have here somebody put in some colleges offer construction inspection and construction management programs, but we lack building and construction trade skilled trade programs. And we have limited facilities to accommodate the technology or equipment necessary for the sector. So very similar to advanced manufacturing in that sense. Thank you for whoever contributed that, in that the equipment is costly and takes up a lot of space. All right. Any other trends folks want to share? Ooh, we're running on time. There's only 2 sectors left. Okay. Okay. All right. Having not heard or seen anything in the chat. All right. So let's go to public safety and government. All right, so some folks put in some comments here. Again, I recommend if you can put in parentheses your affiliation. So the person who contributed this said that we have a dedicated faculty and staff for public safety and government. There are employment opportunities. We have traditional, hybrid, and online courses available. There's, for the weaknesses, there's restrictive unpaid internships and student retention for disproportionately impacted students. So I think this might, I'm sorry to call on you, but if you don't mind, Sharon, if you wanted to share a little bit about your comments.
I was just adding, I think I'm going to go in and add a little bit more and collaborate with our department. So we can collaboratively add more information in the SWOT analysis. We have excellent teams. I'm sure they'll be able to contribute more to the comments. So just wanted to highlight our commitment to making sure our programs offer a diverse offerings for our students, and we're fully engaged in that work, and I want them to have that opportunity for input. So with the restrictive unpaid internships, a lot of the students who are disproportionately impacted can't afford to work for free. So there are opportunities for students to be able to participate, but considerations for payment needs to be something that needs to be considered. So I just want to add that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I was not aware that they had restrictive unpaid internships, so that's a really good comment to add. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an intensive background check that takes about 3 months before our students are even allowed to participate, and then many offer unpaid. So we need to come up with some creative ways for our students to be able to be paid while they're doing their internships. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tina.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. And then finally, we have retail, hospitality, and tourism.
Hi. I'll just quickly review those without having to go through the whole details. Is that okay?
Yes.
So the retail management certificate is a strength. Several colleges have this, but San Diego Mesa, shout out to them, and Monica Romero and Howard Eskew there. This particular retail management certificate program is now tied to a CSU, Humboldt State, which is completely online as a bachelor's completion program. And the reason it's important is if a person completes the RMC, they become more promotable within the major grocery chains. Mesa has great relationships with several large employers. This is a statewide initiative I've been working on. And so they're one of 3. This is the only one in Southern California other than Cerritos, but Fresno City is the other. And these are colleges that have figured out that these are people who can boost your enrollment and also build the local economy because they're going to earn more and then become more promotable. I'm also working on another project around credit for prior learning and CBE to try to make that even faster. So there's that. And then the region has many, many great culinary and hospitality programs. And there, I think I linked it to our website, which is where they're listed. If I have my, if you want to let me know if there's something that we haven't listed, put it there. I think it's one of the things we haven't done. I noted an opportunity you have these skills, culinary and hospitality, but you can apply them to, we're using this statewide initiative, hospitality to health. So there are 2 areas that need culinary hospitality folks, and that is senior living. It's actually, they had a big job gap prior to the pandemic. It's even bigger now. They're absolutely transferable skills. So I've linked some opportunities there. You'll see 2 regions, Sacramento and the Monterey Bay area, have launched those. Those are great regional work put together by 2 regional directors in Sacramento. That's Julie Holt and Josh Schweigert. But these are things, and institutional cooking as well. K-12s is another area we're putting together a program on, a pilot on pre-apprenticeship for culinary to go to work in K-12. So definitely unveiling some of the employer areas that we have neglected in the past, because the thing is, training culinary is very expensive. You need good facilities, you need good faculty, and many of your programs have this already. But how can we help shore that up by actually connecting them to jobs that are not so volatile? Anyway, that's more to be said, but I just wanted to share those key highlights, and kudos to the region really for having the strengths in the area.
Thanks, Joy. And then Monica also thank you for this comment as well. Thank you everybody for adding that. Is there anything else here? Okay.
I forgot, I'm sorry, I need to share that report with you. Facilities management and hospitality put together. This has been piloted in Chaffey College in the Inland Empire. I have a report from the Inland Empire Desert Region, COE. When we add facilities management to a hospitality degree, it actually boosts the starting pay from about 40,000 a year to about 60-something thousand a year. And we know that there is a huge retirement wave coming in the next 5 to 10 years. And Tina, to your earlier research, this is one of those recession and pandemic proof jobs, facilities management. And so it's a huge recommendation we're trying to make this coming year for existing hospitality programs. I'm happy to work with you all more on that, but that's a big opportunity I would just mention.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think when we talked to the COE over in the desert region, we were talking about facilities management as well. And we're working with, in our region, San Diego Housing Federation, yes. And they were talking about facilities management and as well as property asset management. It's completely different, but within their realm. And so I think that's something that we might want to look into as a research project for our COE. So thank you for sharing that. Sorry, Joy, you were muted for a second, but I think
I'll just add it in because I do have to drop to another meeting, but I am launching a veterans apprenticeship program. We got a DOL apprenticeship program approved as a pilot in Northern California, but the employer is interested. And I actually used to live in San Diego. My dad was a Navy veteran. And so the next area we're looking at is San Diego for 2 areas: facilities management and hospitality apprenticeship, and then brokerage and finance. And so I'll be chatting with Deneen and you all about that in future, but it's an area of opportunity. Again, it's an audience that has federal funds for support of their education, but also we have employers who are dying to have these folks trained and ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you. Again, thank you very much for attending. All right, everyone, we're nearing the end of our meeting today for our town hall. I just wanted to say again how much I appreciate you all joining us today on a Friday morning. We do have until June 25th for you to enter in any additional comments you might want to have. You might want to add. What we're going to do is consolidate your comments with the quantitative report that we did, and then produce that recommendations report for the region. And so that way we have all of the information we need in case that RFA comes out or any other opportunities come out that we need to strategize behind. So again, thank you everybody for contributing today, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Tina.
Thank you so much.
Good job, Tina. Thank you.